My topic, the Broadway Musical, is one that continues to evolve and foster some brilliant people. Within this topic, there are so many legends and artists. Today, we think of Broadway as the theater district in New York City and the giant billboards and bright lights of Times Square. In technical terms, for a play or musical to be considered Broadway, it must be held in one of the 40 professional theaters that have 500 seats or more. Theaters with up to 99 seats are considered off-Broadway, and theaters with 99 to 499 seats are considered off-Broadway. The pictures shown are the New Amsterdam Theater located on 42nd Street between 7th and 8th Avenue, holding about 1,702 seats. To begin with, I will talk a little bit about the history of Broadway and theater, then go into depth with some of the famous and influential musicals along with the people who created them, and wrap up with the current state of Broadway musicals. The beginning of theater on Broadway started in 1750, when Thomas Keene and Walter Murray opened a theater company on Nassau Street. The theater held about 208 people and usually had Shakespearean plays or operas. One of the most popular shows during the time was The Beggar's Opera by John Gay. However, theater came to a standstill during the Revolutionary War, but began again in 1798 when the Park Theater was built with about 2,000 seats. Shown is the exterior and interior of the Park Theater. The theater had sections within it to separate the audience by class. There was a pit, box seating, and a top gallery. Prostitutes even conducted business within the theater, giving way for many religious people and members of the church to reject the theater. Minstrel shows were often popular as well during this time. This is when white men would paint their faces black in order to represent African Americans. The theaters that showed these performances started to call themselves museums, so people would not be ashamed to go in. The picture shown is a depiction of a theater built in 1849. However, I think it's a great example to show the disorder of the theater in these early years, as you have the orchestra accommodated by a crying child behind them. The Bowery Theater was built in 1829. The Bowery Theater catered to a lower class, and the Astor Place Theater, which opened in 1849, catered to an upper class audience. In the spring of 1849, two actors appeared in simultaneous productions of Macbeth. American star Edwin Forrest found his following among the working and lower class at the Bowery, and the British William Macready appeared at the Astor Place Opera House. The widespread anti-British sentiment influenced a group of Forrest's fans to disrupt a view of Macready's performances. The cast was bombarded with rotten eggs, and even seats were torn from the gallery flooring. Macready wanted to end the play, but wealthy patrons demanded that he carried on. On the night of May 10, 1849, a group of working-class men descended on the Astor Place Opera House. As Macready performed Macbeth, the mob outside broke into a full-scale riot. As the violence peaked, police fired their guns directly into the crowd. People were killed and injured. This riot separated theater in New York. The upper class attended the opera, the middle class attended melodramas and minstrel shows, and the working class attended the variety shows. Although this riot made divisions within the class, as years went by, New York theater started to become a community. As Mary Henderson said, in the 19th century, theater was permanently established as an institution in the community. Elegant theaters were built, and professionals followed the trend of the times by searching for an area in which to focus their activities. By mid-century, theaters had settled upon Broadway as their locale as they moved within the northward flow of the city. By the 1870s, Broadway and theater were becoming one and the same, and the Union Square area near Broadway and 14th had become New York City's main theater district, and eventually growing towards Madison Square. One of the popular night spots was Niblo's Garden. The theaters housed thousands of seats. Public transportation helped this area evolve as many people traveled through it, and soon shops and restaurants started to take residence within the area as well. In 1906, when Victor Herbert presented his musical at the Red Mill, he created an illuminated sign, making it the first show with its own. White lights were used as colored bulbs burned out very quickly. As more theaters started to introduce these signs, the nickname the Great White Way came along. Showboat, which came out in 1927 with music by Jerome Kern and Oscar Hammerstein, was the show that allowed drama to come back to Broadway, as it had a completely integrated score. It was influenced from the book that was all based on dramatic events. Here is a clip about the music and its producer.
He was a approached by composer Jerome Kern and lyricist Oscar Hammerstein with a revolutionary new musical. It was based on a popular new book by Edna Ferber. Showboat depicted the real lives of both whites and blacks on the Mississippi River. Social realism was not the stuff of conventional musicals. By the time Showboat opened in December 1927, Ziegfeld was sure he had a flop on his hands.
I think he was afraid that the audience wouldn't like it. And of course, opening night, he thought was a complete disaster because nobody shouted or clapped or anything. They just left the theater, and he thought he had a bomb.
It was strange. Some people were applauding very heartily, and others sort of were whispering with one another. You know, they weren't sure of it at all.
These rehearsal clips were shot during the original run of Showboat.
When you yell for the carrot, give a man a heart, you must play yourself or you'll be on the shelf if you wait.
Early audiences didn't know what to make of Showboat because it was so different. The realistic characters were unlike any seen before in musical shows. In his early years on Broadway, Ziegfeld elevated vaudeville to new heights. Now, the visionary had transformed the American musical into an exciting new art form.
Showboat was a tremendously important musical because it represented the first time that any production had linked plot, character, music, and dance integrally.
It's not like looking at a play. It's not like looking at a musical. Somehow you have the feeling that you're stepping into a mystical world, and it comes to life in a way that no other show ever has, before or since. When you go home after seeing Showboat, it's as if you know those people personally.
Showboat was remarkable not only for its haunting music, but for its groundbreaking themes.
It was the first time that any producer in musical theater had dealt with very serious themes such as miscegenation, alcoholism, desertion. It was the first time also that blacks and whites had been linked on stage, where blacks had major performing roles.
Ziegfeld's fears about Showboat proved wrong. The show was a resounding hit, both with critics and with audiences.
Everybody loved it. Every night there was a sellout. Every night of any city that we played in, Boston, Detroit, Chicago, wherever, was always a sellout.
With the success of Showboat, Ziegfeld, at age 60, proved he could still bring the house down. It was his crowning achievement.
No one but Ziegfeld could have produced Showboat. No one had the stature, no one had the power at that time to draw from so many sources, the best designers, the best of everything. Only Ziegfeld could have produced Showboat. If Ziegfeld had done nothing but Showboat, Ziegfeld would have been, in my mind, the immortal producer of all times for Broadway. It was such a revolution.
After the Great Depression, Broadway entered its golden age with many blockbuster hits. But it did go into a declining period, and even though many great musicals were produced during the 1940s, such as Oklahoma in 1943, Times Square had become a bad neighborhood during the 1970s, as you can see by the pictures of Times Square during the 70s. But in the 1890s, when mega musicals such as Les Mis and Cats and Disney's The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast, there was a call to commercialize the area for visitors who were coming into the city to see the plays. Although Times Square once again became a profitable area, the prices and production costs of plays and musicals increased. There are many influential musicals in the history of Broadway, but here I have narrowed it down to a couple of the greats. They were roaring, they were howling. People hadn't seen boys and girls dance like this in so long. Of course they had been dancing like this, but just not where the audience could see them, said Agnes DeMille. A musical that broke the mold before it was Oklahoma by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein. Audience embraced this reassuring all-American show. Oklahoma became a critical phenomenon and cultural success, setting a new long-run record for Broadway musicals. It ran for 3 years in London, toured the United States for 7 years, and made millions of dollars. What made Oklahoma so revolutionary was that before Oklahoma, Broadway composers and lyricists were songwriters, but after Oklahoma, they were dramatics, using everything in the score to develop character and advance the action.
Oh, what a beautiful morning. Oh, what a beautiful day. I got a beautiful feeling. Everything's going my way. I first saw Oklahoma when I was something like 7 or 8 years old. I was totally overwhelmed by the color and the movement of this production that I'd only seen in black and white photos.
Histories of the Broadway musical are usually divided into pre- and post-Oklahoma phases, so up to 1943 and after 1943. There's no question that Oklahoma had a huge influence at the time.
The plot structure is so sound, where every tiny little piece, every character that seems insignificant is woven into the fabric of it and has a complete story.
It was an artistic achievement that had never happened before in the Broadway music theater, which is all the elements work together. The scenic designs, the costume designs, the orchestrations. It actually appeared that one person had created Oklahoma.
The show, Oklahoma, started out with a play by Lynn Riggs, a play called Green Grow the Lilacs that the Theatre Guild produced in 1931.
Oklahoma tells basically the same story as the play. The central conflict is the sort of love triangle between Laurie Curley and the play it's Jeter. That triangle is there.
So the Theatre Guild were getting interested in the idea of taking plays and turning them into musicals of some kind. Richard Rodgers and Hammerstein, I think, thought that this was just a one-shot deal.
Nobody really had a preconceived notion that here was going to be the magic team that was going to take the musical theater forward.
I mean, normally in a musical on Broadway in the late 30s and 40s, you'd have a big opening chorus number, the dancers would come on, do the high kicks, and everyone would get kind of excited about the show. It was a kind of audience warmer.
Well, this musical went up, and there was an old middle-aged lady sitting in the center of the stage, churning butter. There was a voice that said, "Oh, what a beautiful morning," and then we were off.
It was the word of mouth. It was like a hurricane. It was a firestorm. The lines were going around the block.
And it was a huge success. It was sold out.
It is a show that gets done everywhere. I mean, I think the statistics are there's probably a show running or in rehearsal every second of every day.
It says a lot about how perfectly this work and all of the parts of it and all of the artistic achievements melding together created something that epitomized who we were. We were at war. We were absolutely at war.
I mean, Aunt Eller has this marvelous speech about that's life. This is what happens. You deal with it, you get over it, and you move on. And
Aunt Eller says, "It's all right, Laurie, baby. If you can't forget it, just don't try to."
Lots of things happen to a woman. Sickness, or being poor and hungry even. Being left alone in your old age. Being afeared to die. And you can stand it. There's one way. You gotta be hardy. You gotta be.
And it became what America
was about. It represented America. It represented why we were fighting, what we were fighting for.
Agnes de Mille talks about the opening night, that the curtain went up, Curly was heard singing, and there was an audible gasp in the audience that somehow Rogers, Agnes de Mille, Ruben Lemulier, and Hammerstein had just captured something. And once that thing was captured, it just took off.
The original scenario, when Jerome Robbins called Leonard Bernstein for Robbins Musical, was to make a modern-day version of Romeo and Juliet. This idea, first presented in 1949, would have two lovers being Catholic and Jewish. Although this was a great idea at the time, 6 years of planning put the original conflict of religion as less relevant. However, the news was covered with stories about the gang fights between the LA Hispanic population and Spanish Harlem. Here the idea seemed to fit and be something people could relate to. They then created two gangs, the Puerto Rican Sharks and the White Ethnic Jets, on New York City's Upper West Side. Tony, the former leader of the Jets, would fall in love with Maria, the sister of the leader of the Sharks, at the high school dance.
I love you. Yes, but hurry. Go.
This show was based on Christopher Eisenwood's Berlin Stories. The show depicts the linking stories of a cabaret singer, a writer from America, and the residents of Berlin, all caught up in the changing society. The musical was a challenge to Harold Prince, who was the show's producer as well as its director, and he worked closely with his songwriting team, John Kander and Fred Ebb. Eventually, the collaborators combined the cabaret numbers with the action of the story, and the raw edge of the material made Cabaret the most provocative and challenging musical of its day. It launched the careers of its creators and that of Joe Gray as the eerie, ominous MC. A film version by Bob Fosse in 1971 didn't quite reach the musical's power. Fred Ebb said, "It's about people's dancing on the edge of a cliff and not quite falling over." Here's a clip of Alan Cummings recreating the musical in 1988.
Happy to see you. Bleibe, reste, stay. Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. Im Cabaret, au Cabaret, Cabaret. Meine Damen und Herren, Mesdames et Messieurs, Ladies and Gentlemen, guten Abend, bonsoir, good evening. Wie geht's? Comment ça va? Do you feel good? Yeah, I bet you do. Ich bin euer Fernseher, je suis votre compère. I am your host und sage willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. Im Cabaret, au Cabaret, to Cabaret. And now, presenting the Cabaret Girls.
Chicago premiered in 1975 and was a musical created by John Cantor, Frank Ebb, and Bob Fosse. The musical was a saga of two 1920s flappers seeking fame through homicides. This concept musical cast a cynical spotlight on social hypocrisy and media-based celebrity. There was a lot of skepticism around the musical Cats, as Andrew Lloyd Webber was working solo as a composer with Trevor Nunn, a well-known Shakespearean director, on a musical based off a series of children's poems about cats written by T.S. Eliot. But the musical was a great success, and the set and choreography enchanted the audience. When Cats had its final performance on September 10, 2000, until the recent revival, it had grossed $380 million on Broadway and nearly $3 billion worldwide. The song Memory became a global hit and was recorded in more than a dozen languages. Andrew Lloyd Webb's Phantom of the Opera was another musical that topped the charts. At the time, the tickets were $45 a seat, but customers didn't seem to mind as the show became packed every night. Like Cats, Phantom of the Opera used marketing as a power, as many members of the audience left the theater with a memento. After the success of the stage version of Beauty and the Beast, Disney decided to turn its most successful animated feature ever, The Lion King, into a musical. But unlike Beauty and the Beast, Disney approached the visionary avant-garde director and puppeteer Julie Taymor to reimagine the movie. The musical became one of the most technically complicated and visually astonishing productions in Broadway history. The movie's songs by Tim Rice and pop icon Elton John were changed to a South African sound created by Lebo M. And the whole feel and casting of the show was culturally diverse and inclusive of all races, ages, and tastes. Taymor became the first woman to win a Tony for Best Direction of a Musical, and The Lion King is still playing all over the world. Here's a picture of Times Square in 1956. Broadway has definitely changed throughout the years, and Times Square continues to lighten the skies while the sun goes down. And today we still have new musicals that make impacts in the way we see the genre, like musicals that have come out before them. Such as Hamilton with its first performance in 2016, this musical takes on an old story and makes it new, filling it with rap, which is far from the opera that used to fill the theaters. The show was sold out for months in advance, and there seems to be an envy for anyone who has scored a seat. Another play that has conveyed quite an audience is the Book of Mormon, coming out in 2011. The musical is filled with profanity and metaphors that have made some uncomfortable. Kinky Boots also shows drag queens and transgender people and introduces the audience to a world they might not have been familiar with.
We gonna rise up, time to take a shot. We gonna
would like to share with you the most amazing book.
Hello, my name is Elder Grant. It's a book about America a long, long time ago. It has so many awesome parts. You simply won't believe how much this book can change your life. Hello, my name is Elder Green. I would like to share with you this book of Jesus Christ. Hello, my name is Elder Young. Hello, did you know that Jesus lived here in the USA? You can read all about it now. Hello, in this nifty book it's free. No, you don't have to pay. Hello, hello, my name is Elder Smith. And can I leave this book with you for you to just peruse? Hello, hello, hello. I'll just leave it here. It has a lot of information you can really use. Hello. Hi, my name is Jesus Christ. You have a lovely home. Hello. It's an amazing book. Bonjour. Hola. Ni hao. Me llamo Elder White. Are these your kids? It gives you the secret to eternal life. Sound good? Eternal life in Jesus Christ is super fun. Hello. Ding dong. And if you let us in, we'll show you how it can be done. No, thank you, sure. Well, that's fine. Goodbye. Have fun and have. Hey now, you simply won't believe how much this book will change your life. This book will change your life. Hello, would you like to change religions? I have a free book written by Jesus.
No, no, Elder Cunningham, that's not how we do it. You're making things up again. Just stick to the approved dialogue. Elder Smith, going.
Hello, hello. My name is Elder Cunningham. And we would like to share with you this book of Jesus Christ. Hello, hello. Just take this book. It's free for you and me. You see, you simply won't believe how much this book will change your life. Will change your life, so you won't burn in hell. You're gonna die someday, but if you read this book, you'll see that there's another way to spend eternity with friends and family. We can fully guarantee that this book will change your life. 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 The Book of Mormon.
Many movies and books are being turned into plays, as School of Rock recently debuted on Broadway with Andrew Lloyd Webber. There are influences being drawn from everywhere. Classics are being brought back on Broadway as they are being seen as relatable and relevant once again. The current state of Broadway has mixed reviews, some claiming it's purely driven for tourists and theater will never be the same, while others see more of a positive view. Some question if the Great American Musical will ever return, as there has always been a battle of the best between the American and British shows. Stephen Sondheim once said that you have two kinds of shows on Broadway: revivals and the same kind of musicals over and over again, all spectacles. You get your tickets for The Lion King once a year in advance, and essentially a family comes as if to picnic, and they pass on to their children the idea that that's what theater is. A spectacular musical you see once a year, a staged version of a movie. It has nothing to do with theater at all. It has to do with seeing what is familiar. We live in a recycled culture. I don't think the theater will die per se, but it's never going to be what it was. You can't bring it back. It's gone. It's a tourist attraction. And although his perspective might be right, there are many people who live for this industry and continue to work hard. At the end of the day, it's art, and people who believe in it will push until they produce something magnificent. Oscar Hammerstein said, "It is nonsense to say what a musical should or should not be. It should be anything it wants to be. And if you don't like what it is, then don't go to it." There is only one absolutely indispensable element that a musical must have. It must have music. And there is only one thing it has to be. It has to be good. So to wrap up the presentation, here is the Tony Awards opening with Neil Patrick Harrison in 2013. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
All right. It's only this next singer's 4th time singing in his pub, so cut him some slack. He's singing something new.
I'm Neil. I wouldn't be here if someone else hadn't passed on hosting, so special thanks to Shia LaBeouf for this opportunity. I can break your heart with a work of art and a song that's quiet and small. But we're back where we began it all. Radio City, music hall. So tonight, we might go bigger. That's right, it's bigger. It's Broadway's greatest night and we're raring to go. Let's make it bigger. Tonight it's bigger. Who will take home a Tony statue? We don't know. I guarantee a truly legendary show. Include a cast of kinky boots, you know they're beautiful and buff as Navy SEALs. And you could bounce a quarter off the ass of Billy Porter. Lord, he does 8 shows a week in 8-inch heels. Hats off to Berry Gordy, he runs Motown like a boss. He dominates top 40 and he banged Diana Ross. He wrote his own libretto, which is really kind of ballin'. He took every Motown classic and he said, I'll put them all in. Make it bigger. That's right, it's bigger. It's bigger. I just learned this dance like half an hour ago. We're going bigger. Like so much bigger. You ever seen so many divas in a row? Well, stick with me cause your MC's a seasoned pro. It's Pippin, never Pippin, always the king. In the orange corner of the sky. But the sky is overcrowded with his oh so highly touted cast of singing circus people flying by. The cast of Bring It On had counted 32 debuts. Hey kids, welcome to Broadway, don't forget your union dues. In tandem like we planned them, forgive me if it's random, but Mike Tyson had a one-man show. Let's give the man a hand and make things bigger. I'm here with Iron Mike, he's a heavyweight, yo. We're going bigger. The right is bigger. We've got cheerleaders, contortionists, and so, hey, he'll go a press sports bar, change the channel to our show. Go, go! The magical Matildas run the show and nearly killed us, so they got a special Tony of their own. The strikes of the Achilles of the jaded former Billies, they get Tonys but get fired when they're grown. Now here's the kids from Christmas Story, Annie and her orphans. So many child actors high on Red Bull and endorphins. They barely come up to your knees, but God, they're singing like MVPs, and they're the reason this whole season seems to look like Chuck E. Cheese. And geez, it's bigger. That's right, it's bigger. Is there a Tony daycare where all of you go? You're getting bigger. The night is bigger. Do your parents set aside your Broadway dough? When I play Doogie, never mind, on with the show. Broadway's where famous people go. But being famous doesn't mean that you will get a good review. So Alec, write Ben Brantley if you want, that's entertaining too. We've got magic to do. see those punks. Oh, wait, check this out. Can I have my Tom Hooper Les Mis close-up, please? See, on Broadway, we don't need extreme close-ups to prove we're singing live. We sing live 8 shows a week. Check it. At the end of the day, we are gathered together to honor the best and the brightest. And tomorrow, the fashion police will report on your dress and who wore it the tightest. If you win, have the time of your life. Tell your manager, dad, and your mom thanks. Hi to your kids and your husband or wife, maybe just for the hell of it, Tom Hanks. Nothing is bigger and better than seeing a veteran get an ovation, or seeing a brilliant beginner freak out on a win on their first nomination. There's a kid in the middle of nowhere who's sitting there living for Tony performances, singing and flipping along with the Pippins and Wickets and Kikis, Matildas, and Mormonses. So we might reassure that kid and do something to spur that kid, because I promise you, all of us out here tonight, we were